Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight, we are talking about episode 2 of Survivor Season 39, Island of the Idols. And so now we have a little bit more sense of how the whole theme is going to evolve, right?
Right.
We talked last time about, like, it was interesting how it was handled, but, like, what are they going to do next time? And so we see that, yeah, they've clearly got some ideas for how to keep those island visits interesting, or at least they have two so far.
Yep.
So, I wanted to start with something. Did you see promos for this episode? And if so, were they spoilery?
No, I didn't actually see any promos for this one.
Okay, because I didn't either. But then again, I also don't tend to watch anything where those promos would generally show up. So I didn't see any either. But what I did see was on Wednesday afternoon before the episode, Jeff Probst himself basically apologizing to people on Twitter. It's like, yes, I know that CBS is for some reason putting out promos that have spoilers in them. I wish they wouldn't do that also. But I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. So it was just kind of interesting that I wasn't sure. I didn't look up to see what those might be because, at least at that time, I didn't want to be spoiled. I mean, I've seen the episode now, but it I didn't actually figure out what that was all about.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Normally I do see the previews, and it's not the first time that that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've mentioned that before. Like, I see them sometimes during NFL games and stuff, and it's like, well, okay, that gave away more than I expected. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anyway, it turns out to be something that neither of us actually knows the answer to. So let's just jump to the beginning of the episode where I have to give Aaron some credit and also sort of a skeptical look from me personally, because I have no idea how he pulled off a magic trick where he made everybody else apologize for them not trusting him. They're in the perspective of, you hung around with Ronnie all the time, and every time we mentioned anything about him, you didn't want to hear it. That's
Right.
why we didn't tell you. And so now he's acting all pissy because they didn't let him in and he didn't get to be in the loop. And somehow everybody ends up apologizing to him. I'm so sorry. We understand now that you would have been on our side. And I'm like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they actually believe that. I think they were just trying to, because he was being, like, so irate.
Yeah.
At that point, it's just like, of course he wasn't going to be on their side. Look how he acted when the guy got voted off.
Yeah.
That's why nobody was talking to you, because you act like this.
Yeah, so, yeah, maybe they're just humoring him.
Right, because it's just late at night, and they just don't know what, like, at this point, like, okay, yeah.
I was just especially thinking of Missy the next morning going to him. But you're right that it absolutely might have just been, I need to have a conversation with him, and unless I stroke his ego here,
Right.
we're not going to get anywhere.
Because you can't go to him and be like, hey, here, you can't rationally tell him, like, why they didn't, because then he'd just be like, wow, of course I would have done that. Yeah, you don't trust me. I don't trust
Right.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
like, it's understandable completely that having had your biggest ally get voted out by complete surprise and finding out that you were the only one who didn't know the real plan, like, yeah, that's something that's absolutely should be alarming to any player.
Yeah.
So it's entirely reasonable for him to be concerned at the very least, right? And even anger is it's not a helpful, but it's at least an understandable reaction, right? Especially if, as he's thinking, he really would have been okay with it. It doesn't mean it's everybody else's fault for not somehow reading his mind about that when he was giving them signals to the contrary.
Right.
But at the same time, I was watching him be so pissy, and yet just everybody kind of falling all over themselves to try to make it up to him. And I'm just like, wait, what? How did that happen? I mean, there's even a brief moment where like Vince is like, hey, how come my name came up? And then everybody but Aaron starts explaining like, oh, we don't need to be mad at Aaron. That was all Ronnie's idea. And I'm like, right. What is happening right now? Why is Aaron getting off so lightly here? He was absolutely involved in all of that. So I don't know. I mean, it's not a big deal, but I was just I was sitting there with my head cocked, just like, how did he manage that? That seems weird. But then again, maybe they just didn't give us confessionals of people saying, I guess we got to go make Aaron feel better so he won't just be a huge bummer.
Right, because they had to spend so much time on the other side of the tribe. And I think that's kind of where I landed, is that it's like the way he accomplished that is by being just such an out-of-control jerk that nobody really had any other way to treat him except like that.
Yeah.
You know? But we'll see as it develops.
Yeah. So we do have Missy talking about being just happy that as a result of Ronnie going home, the women do have at least a nominal numbers advantage. And so that means, you know, step one for the Women's Alliance went off as planned. You know, like there's a long way to go, but at least that first step went as intended. Meanwhile, we get the other emotional person who has to be managed subplot of the episode. We have Nora, who apparently went out in the rain in the middle of the night to save the fire. Good for her. But apparently just sat there fuming at everybody else who was asleep without saying anything until the next morning when she decided to be extremely passive-aggressive about it.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, several of them are kind of just like saying, well, I'm not going to apologize for not noticing something because I was asleep.
Well, and that was Molly in particular, which...
Yeah. Well, Dan said that too, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this is because, the only reason I mentioned is because I thought that was really funny, like when Molly, like... I liked Molly in this episode, but I also I completely understand why she was targeted and why she missed out, like why she wasn't paying attention. Like she deserved to get voted out. Like I'm not going to, you know, say there was any reason not to, but I did like her. I thought that her response here was kind of funny, and I did like her. Like, this is why no one ever picks on me, because I just don't care.
It's not any fun to pick on me.
It's not any fun for them.
Yeah. But boy, you know, we got a whole montage of Nora acting very, very just sort of judgy and negative and complaining all the time. And like, you know, obviously editing is a factor in that sort of thing, but boy, that's some extreme, like that would be hard to live with. And,
right.
And we have...
I mean, her seemed very unpleasant. Molly seemed actually really cool, and I think that's why, what's his name? The school teacher.
Tommy
kind of summed up the best when he's like, yeah, I mean, I like these guys. Like, this is the cool kids. Like, that's what everybody keeps saying. Like, I want to sit with the cool kids. Like, I like being with them, but I need to decide, is that the right thing for me? And that's kind of... That was very understandable, like, because they were funny, and they were... And the other side... You know, because you've got the one dude who's already painted a target on himself by being paranoid, and he hasn't really done anything to, like, re-endear himself. And then you got Nora, who...
Oh. Got you frozen
like,
again.
I can see why you would want to pair with the other side, you know? I can see why you would want to pair with the Jack, Jamal, Molly group.
Right.
Because they're just much more pleasant, but at the same time, like, you know, they're also a bigger threat. So.
One of the things that you said she deserved to be voted out, and I agree that with that to
I
an
don't say that it
extent.
was 100% the right decision.
Yeah,
I can understand why
right.
she was
Well,
deserving.
I was thinking about it because it became more obvious towards the end that something was happening, right? But like I certainly, for the first 2/3 of the episode, it would have never even occurred to me that she was a target at all, which is of course why she didn't expect to be a target.
Right.
But it seems in hindsight that the real failing essentially was just that Molly, Jamal, and it's Jack, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that they just didn't fully realize how obvious it was to everyone else that they were a strong trio,
Right.
like a subgroup of the larger alliance, So they're thinking, oh, hey, we got everybody except Nora and Jason together agreeing that it's one of them. We're good. But they didn't fully realize that, there were, let's see, how many, there's going to be 5 other people looking at Jamal, Molly, and Jack and saying, those 3 are spending an awful lot of time together. So,
well, yeah, I think Jamal even said that, like, he even said, like, oh, we're subtly working everyone. It's like, well, it wasn't so subtle.
Yeah, not as subtle as you thought.
And I think he summed it up in the tribal council when he was like, yeah, we're just going to play this tribal council. We're like first gear right now. And,
yeah.
And everyone's like, yeah, you are.
Yeah, the thing, I had some real mixed feelings with him in the tribal council because on the one hand, when Jason kind of tried to, say like, oh, well, you're in first gear because you haven't had to do anything, you feel safe and all of that, and tried to kind of turn that on like almost like a shaming thing, like you're not really playing the game and therefore that's like a bad thing somehow. And I liked Jamal's answer a whole lot, which is essentially just to say, first of all, there's a little bit of a, hey, you play your game your way and I'll play my game my way. But there's also an element of, you're in the position you are because of how you're playing. And I'm in the position I am because of how I'm playing. So let's not compare the two. And I kind of liked I thought his answer was cool, except that, of course, we knew that he was actually missing a whole subplot where people are actually trying to target one of his alliance members because of the way he's not paying attention. So, on the one, like, I liked his answer, except, of course, that we know that he actually, Jason actually really did have a good point about it, that you're not paying enough attention. So, it was perhaps in that sense not the wisest thing for Jason to sort of call that out. But of course, once Molly goes, it's not like it's a secret anymore after that. So, so in any event, we have Nora, who, despite being someone that, at least based on this edited montage we see, seems like it would be someone who would be very difficult to live with day to day.
Yes.
And yet, I do have like a sympathy for her, like an empathy. Like, she's someone who doesn't get along with people very well. Like, and it's not always something that you have a lot of voluntary control over, And so she's kind of always been the person who kind of lets herself proactively be defined as the oddball who doesn't fit in, because that's easier in some ways than trying to fit in and failing and then being discouraged about it. But in the tribal council, she actually talks about recognizing that has ramifications on other things in her life. Like, she doesn't necessarily have as many close personal relationships as a result, because she doesn't always try to engage with people that way. And she's talking about how that's kind of magnified here. And I felt sympathy for her, but on the other hand, I was also thinking, like, that would be a great thing to talk to a therapist about. And I mean that with all sincerity and like wanting, that. But when you're on a show that's all about forming these social relationships, that it's not really an optional piece of the game.
Right.
So it's kind of like, she's recognizing in hindsight that having not tried very hard to connect with people has resulted in her not having connected with anyone. I kind of thought she was going to get voted out, and I didn't, frankly, have much sympathy for her until that whole little speech in the tribal council, honestly.
No, and she equally could have, to the point of like how I said Molly deserved to get voted out. Like Nora deserved to get voted out as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all of there was not. Yeah.
It's not everybody else's responsibility to indulge her negative behavior.
Right. Just like it is Molly's responsibility to recognize that she is seen as, you know, sort of the manipulator of the top three. You know, and that she might become a target. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, you know, in some ways, there was a glibness about her that can be charismatic to watch on TV, but can be off-putting to the other people sort of standing there in the circle with her, you know? Where it's just kind of like, oh, yeah, no, I got this handled. I'm not worried about it. You know, you're stressed. Why? I'm not stressed. And it's just one of those things that everyone else is kind of going, I kind of feel like you should be stressed. No, I got this under wraps. And everyone else is like,
Well, and the funny thing
maybe
is,
I don't want you to have it under wraps.
I think they did generally like that, but they recognized, because of the situation they're in the game, that she was having that charismatic like pull over them.
Yeah.
And that's like I said, that the Tommy said, you know, like he wanted to hang out with him, like he wanted to be friends with Molly.
Yeah.
He wanted to be as positive as her, but like he also recognizes like she's influencing a lot of people with her positive, like kind of laid back but yet direct attitude, you know.
You know, I one of the things that we're definitely seeing develop so far this season, and obviously it's early so far, but there seems like there are a lot of people who are intent on playing endgame Survivor from day one.
Yeah.
Which, it's certainly not bad to have that sort of thing, like, in mind to consider. But it also, I don't know that it necessarily, like, you know, if we want to put ourselves in Tommy's shoes, since he was kind of framed as, like, a swing vote, on the one hand, like, okay, someone who's maybe going to be a threat later. But on the other hand, you're on day 6 and you've just hitched your wagon to Nora. Is she going to be able to help you the way Molly would have?
It's true.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But like even Jason is in that boat where we see him really having to try to delicately manage Nora of like, I'm already on the outs, so I cannot afford to cast aside anyone who might be my ally at all. But I'm having to sort of gently pat her on the shoulder and say, maybe it's not helpful to just tell yourself that you cannot deal with people. Let's be positive thinking about it. You have to deal with people. That is the game you're playing.
Right.
So let's try to make an effort. And yeah, so anyway, you can see him having to grit his teeth a little bit for that, I think. So let's see. We do get, yeah, so there was certainly, it was seeded pretty early on that we had this trio. It's interesting that this trio of Molly, Jamal, and Jack, and yet, at least in the edit, all the talking is Molly and Jamal. Like, Jack is frequently there, but he doesn't say very much.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I just feel like it's probably an edit thing. I mean, he just probably wasn't as interesting, didn't have as much to add because there wasn't as much.
Yeah. Well, he's also the youngest.
There wasn't much going on other than like trying to work the split vote, which didn't really require a lot of discussion.
Yeah. But I just mean every time we saw any discussion involving that group, it was really always Molly and Jamal talking. But this is where we have Nora saying it's like high school all over again. And my thought at this point is I suspect she is subjectively right. in at least in the sense that as much as I was wanting to really resist them using this whole metaphor of the lunchroom and the cool kids table and the nerds, like I kind of was wishing that they wouldn't use that type of metaphor for it. But at the same time, just watching Nora and the way she's behaving here, I can absolutely imagine her also acting that way in high school and having similar results.
Yes. And all that was driven by her. It's not like the producers created this narrative. Like,
right. Yeah.
She created it, and then everybody else started running with it.
Well,
you know?
It's a very specific kind of mindset. The sort of person who makes themselves a martyr, but then wants everybody else to thank them for it. Right? You know, like she saw the fire going out and she says, someone should do it and no one else is going to do it. So, I guess it has to be me. So I'm going to go out and do it and be miserable, but not say anything about it to anyone else at the time, and then complain to everybody else that nobody helped her later. Like, there are a number of different paths she could have taken at any point along there, you know?
Right.
In the meantime, we have over at Lyro, there's more discussion of fire in the rain, and we have an interesting little vignette where Tom and Aaron have been trying to make fire, and they keep struggling because everything's wet, and they're just kind of having a hard time doing it. And then Chelsea says, "Hey, can I try?" And she does it like right away. Within 2 minutes, I think is what Tom said. You know, and good for him in the sense of just like he's sort of, he talks about like his bruised male ego, but with an obvious sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Chelsea also had pretty good luck just walking around to gather firewood and just saying, "Hey, what's that?" You know, because on the one hand, you know, there's certainly a luck aspect, but you know, to be sure, she's going out and doing things, but also paying attention, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's how you do it. Not like where you just disappear for 45 minutes. You have a job.
Right. You do it like, yeah, there are plenty of things that require you to go and do stuff. Like, just be observant while you're doing those things. Don't.
Yeah.
Don't
if you're going to go out for firewood, you better come back with firewood.
Yep.
And so it's so good for her that she finds an idol, and it certainly sets into motion some of the things that we kind of wondered about, right? Just in the sense that we have people with the opportunity to get idols over at Island of the Idols, but we now know that there are also hidden ones. So,
yeah. Well, and I wonder if that was like, if they're timing it where it's like that was the one from that she failed to win last time on Island of the Idols.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting. Like they certainly,
like yeah. So there isn't another one right now until someone loses at Island of the Idols, and then another one will show up back at the beat. And I don't know that's what they're doing, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah. It would have to decide like which beach would it be at, right? Because if she didn't win it and she's on one tribe, do they hide it at her tribe's beach or the other one? If that were the thing.
Yeah. And which was this the same or I can't remember.
Well, so this Chelsea,
they would have been on the same tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's possible. We'll have to see if there's any continuing pattern in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, there's literally nothing other than that pattern of we didn't see any hidden immunity idols last time. We saw a missed idol at the island, and then we saw a hidden immunity idol this time.
Yeah. I like
that's the only pattern I have.
Yeah. No, I mean we're early on enough that there's there's an improv game where you talk about making patterns, and it requires sort of three people, right? Because you have one person who just says anything. You could say apple, right? And then you would say something else, whatever you think of, just whatever comes to mind.
Banana.
Okay, so that would suggest that maybe the pattern is fruits, right? So the third person if they say a fruit, that locks the pattern, right? Now it's definitely fruits. When it's after the second one, you wonder, it's like, well, what else maybe could it be? Although those two, it seems like it's pretty obvious. But anyway.
Or, I mean, they could say something where the third letter was A, and that would change the pattern.
Hmm?
But still use the same two. Like if you just said scar, like that would take a little bit of time to unwind. But
that's a heady one for sure. Yeah, but the point just being that it's also like that old saying, you know, like once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is sabotage.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we had kind of a fun sequence of her sort of being really happy, but also having to like return with the firewood and not let anybody know how happy she is that she just found an idol. Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, and she's also very pleased too that like she seems all in on this Girls Alliance too, but is pleased that like, you know, the guys don't seem to have picked up on that. And so this is what brought us to the group meditation / yoga on the beach session led by Nora, which I had a brief little bit of whiplash there because I was just thinking she seems really uptight to me for someone who's so into yoga. But then again, I've also certainly known people like that, you know, who somehow like try to make things like yoga competitive. You know, and
well, yeah. Once they got started, you realize this wasn't like the most relaxing yoga. Like it went from like
do like 50 arm raises, and everyone else is like, "What are you talking about? What?" It's a pretty aggressive routine for people who might just be total, you know, total newbies. I mean, we didn't really see the rest of it, and it was obvious by the end that a couple of people just kind of tapped out at some point and just said, yeah, I'm just going to lay here. You guys can keep going. But while they're all on the beach, they bring out a boat shows up with a message that Kelly has to come with them right away to go to Island of the Idols. I thought it was kind of cool to have it just kind of come out of nowhere there instead of it being like after the challenge again.
Right.
I think it's, as far as episode pacing, you know, like the first episode, it's kind of different. But as far as episode pacing, I think it's better to have it earlier because that way it doesn't disrupt the who's getting voted out strategy as much. But then again, it's also like different in that regard because like one of the things we talked about last time was how much or how little of a problem is it to be pulled away during that crucial moment. And if it's not happening then that's no issue at all.
Really no negative impact on her from that perspective. You know? Right.
So in any event, she gets headed over there. There's a brief bit of amusement where she is astounded to see Sandra and Boston Rob, but then there's a little bit of a line of like, Cochran's not back there too, is he? Or something to that effect.
Well, because she made the joke of like, I have no idea what I'm going to find here. Like maybe Cochran will just be standing on a rock or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Before she saw them.
Yeah. You know. And Sandra assures her that it's better than Cochran. I thought it was weird, but I guess it makes sense for perhaps newer viewers or people who missed the first episode. That I thought it was weird that they actually sort of focused on the Oath of the Idols again. Like for our benefit, as opposed to like it makes sense, of course, that they would need to show it to her, but did we need to see it again? It's probably just because they want to just make sure people aren't confused about what's happening.
Yeah, that plus there was also like it was kind of what started the narrative in her head that got her like when she had to think about the test. That's like what got her all worked up.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You needed to show it either way to like get that part of it, so you might as well show the whole thing for new viewers.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I picked up on what the test was going to be relatively early in that sequence, but loved it and loved how long it took for the reveal. I loved how that whole thing played out. How did you feel about it?
I did.
Oh,
the thing that I felt about is that I felt like it was just. I felt that it was easier than making fire against Rob.
Well, yeah.
to have to be able to just recall something you just heard, even though it was difficult and there was a lot of facts. Like, I did like it, though. I don't want to take away from that. It's just, but then I started thinking, we also don't know what the offer would have been had she declined last time, what the handicap would have been if it would have been something that would have made it much more reasonable.
Right. Well, and the thing is, too, that before accepting, we didn't know how hard those questions might be.
Right.
Right? Because generally speaking, the questions were not super hard. No. But they could have been, though. So, like, how many daughters does Sandra have could have been, what was the name of Sandra's youngest daughter? Right. You know, it's like, so she got 3 for 3, out of the possible 5 that she could have been asked. And that was being worried that she had not guessed what might be about to happen. She had not especially been paying attention. Their attempts to bore her on purpose were effective, which I was incredibly amused by once they kind of kept going long enough and they used the editing to kind of make it obvious that they were sort of deliberately focusing on small talk about personal lives rather than talking about like the game, in a serious way. I was, it's like, what is going on? Oh, yeah. Okay. Connecting with people and listening and paying attention and retaining details, even when they're being boring.
And you're thinking about a million other things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool, actually. And so it ended up being at least 2 for 2 in terms of lessons that I think are actually really valuable lessons in a way that was interesting to watch on TV. Now, we'll see what happens next week. The preview makes it sound like they have to go on like a spy mission to infiltrate the other tribe's camp for some reason, which seems incredibly fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I really liked it. One of the things that occurred to me, though, in that sequence is before she agreed to do it, she talked about, she was honest in admitting that, yes, there had been some of that she wasn't really paying attention to. And she talked about having a bad memory and she was anxious about that. And it just made me think about how often in life, I think probably everybody does this to some extent, we tell ourselves that we're bad at something, right? As a way to it's kind of an underachieving trait, right? You don't want to, you don't want to build yourself up and be disappointed or embarrassed. So you tell yourself that if you fail, it's because I have a bad memory. But she actually, even though the questions were not as hard as they could have been, she did fine, right? She got 3 out of 3 that they asked. So it just made me think how sometimes that's a behavior that I have caught myself doing, of just saying oh, I'm terrible with faces, or I don't remember people's names and that sort of thing, where I realize that saying that kind of lets me off the hook for making an effort to do it.
You're right. Yeah.
So in any event, that just occurred to me, but I really liked this whole sequence. So even though I was kind of skeptical about what they were going to do, I've been very pleased with these segments so far.
Yeah, I think it's been cool. And if there really is something where you have to go infiltrate the other camp, that could be a cool new 3rd addition to it. So
yeah, I love that, because I can't help but be curious about when there's still so many people, when there's 10 people, if they've been there for 8-9 days, I feel like someone else showing up, you recognize that. But the thing we also have to remember is that, what we don't see on TV is that there are actually camera guys and producers around too, right? Sure. So how easy would it be to just sort of try to stealth in there and be not immediately noticed? Would it be possible to be seen and not recognized in that way? You know what I mean? As opposed to just trying to be just total stealth and not observed at all. Especially at night when you can't see everyone very well.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens in this next one
Yeah.
and how it plays out.
Well, I feel like it would be easy to fool me because I'm not good with faces. Um,
Good.
in any event, when she comes back, well, so first of all, great for her, first for hesitating and allowing us to see how Rob does sweeten the deal, right? Reduces the number of questions she has to get right and makes it an idol that could last for 3 tribals instead of just 2. But
Yep.
she gets it. That's great. But the next question we would have is, what is she going to tell her tribe? Because we know what Elizabeth did. And I was really impressed with Kelly's resourcefulness. First of all, it was surprising that she decided to tell the truth about these great big statues, but then didn't say who they were, and then essentially just told the exact same story that Elizabeth did.
I know. I thought that was hilarious that they both came up with the same exact lie.
Yeah, well, it makes perfect sense based on, Ghost Island, right? That's what happened over there, so it seems plausible. And also, kudos for her for leaning into the actual big emotions that she was feeling about it, but to get all emotional about it and have that kind of be simultaneously real, but also a distraction. And to just be like making a teary fuss about pulling off her shirt. It's like, I'm going to show you guys I don't have an idol. And they're all like, you don't have to do that. In the meantime, she's got it in her hair. And I was like, That's so great. I loved all of that.
It's almost like she wanted to strip down, like just so they could not like so that she could prove that she didn't have an idol when she actually had it in her hair.
I know, but I loved that whole bit, just especially because like I'm sure that the emotion was largely genuine, but she was also very consciously using it kind of as camouflage for her secret stuff, right? Yep. It's like if you're crying because you're emotional, people can't always tell what the emotion is exactly. They just know you're crying. So, but that whole little sequence there where she's talking about like, I didn't have a lot of places to hide it, so I hid it in my hair, and then I made a big show of showing, like, I'm dumping out my bag, it's not my shirt, you can see I'm just paranoid that you guys are going to think I have an idol or something. And she really did, and she was just talking about sort of flinching when they go to hug her and sometimes brush her hair, and, like their arm touches her hair, and she's like, I thought that was so fun. I liked, not that I had any dislike for her before, but I liked her a lot after that.
Yeah, I really do like her as well. So,
so let's see, what do we have next? We have, so again, she randomly picks the next person. I don't think we saw who it was, right?
No.
Yeah. So, that's also seems like it's could possibly be a little producer trick to just allow them to have it be whoever they want. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that they're doing that, but it just does seem like pick randomly, but don't show us on TV who it was. I mean, it could be anyone.
Yeah.
Let's see. So this brings us to the challenge. I always like the, amphibious challenges where, I like water challenges in general, but, they have to go in and out. And sometimes that really makes a difference. Like, we had the Vokai tribe in this one really struggling with the part where they were still in the water, but sort of having to deal with the ladder and prop it up and everything. And they just struggled mightily compared to the other tribe.
Yeah, they had trouble getting it to the spot because of like the current and the waves. And then once they got it propped up, like they couldn't hold it up while she was trying to untie it. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, they still made it incredibly close, only to lose in that last moment. That was a heartbreaker. For them.
I mean, that's part of how the challenges are designed, though, is that they're supposed to equalize at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
But to literally close the entire, literally have it be 2-2.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. We got to see Elizabeth showing off her swimming. Like, she went down and untied that entire thing, like, before.
Just all in one go. Yeah. We lost a little bit of that sentence.
I was just saying the same thing as you.
Oh, okay.
You ended up just saying what I was saying. It's all in one go. Yeah.
Sure. So it was for immunity plus a reward, and everybody reacted so strongly to the reveal of the spices reward that it actually prompted Probst to say "wow" about their reaction.
Yes.
I don't know what that was about, but it was kind of funny. So let's see. We had I don't have a lot of other notes about it. So I was just thinking how it was nice to have Lyro win, just because we get to have both tribes go to tribal council, as opposed to some seasons where one tribe is just dominating and they don't have to go to tribal council for 5-6 episodes.
Right.
But certainly at this point it looked like it was going to be Nora and Jason in trouble. But this is where we have Tommy talking about putting teacher Tommy away and having survivor Tommy come out to play the game.
Which was funny.
Yeah.
I
So,
like him.
yeah, I do too. I'm not sure I completely agree that he made the right choice in this one, but given how lopsided the votes were, it may have been that he just saw which way the wind was blowing and decided not to fight it. So here we have a bit where, the king, the queen, and the jack, which is actually a very funny way to describe that trio. Just because, especially just Molly and Jamal seem very dominant, and then Jack is also there. So it's the king, the queen, and the jack. I thought that was great. And it took me way too long to realize that's what was the joke.
I mean, I think it was it's a joke almost to what you were talking about, where so much of it seems like it's Jamal and Molly, but he's the Jack and he's Jack.
Exactly.
Funny.
So there's a sequence where it's really almost like they're bringing in Nora and Jason for job interviews of why should we keep you and not the other, and Nora just absolutely refuses to help herself in any way by basically having no other options and yet refusing to even admit that she would be willing to vote for Jason. I mean, what are they supposed to do with that? I'm not sure what she thought she was gaining with those answers. Any idea, or she's not someone who's really.
No, I just don't think she's very good at this part, that part of it, and she got bailed out by the fact that other people, recognized an opportunity to get rid of Molly, without her knowing, without Molly being able to orchestrate anything against it, because she would have been blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
So, I agree. I don't think that she handled it well. I think that, I think that it went from they were planning on getting rid of Jason with her as the backup in case he had the idol.
Right, yeah.
To deciding that maybe she should actually be the one to go because she's just kind of a pain. And
well, yeah, it seemed like, some of the other girls were just feeling like she's really annoying, and if we're splitting the vote anyway, why don't we just make it split the other direction?
Right. And
so, that makes sense because, it's even if you get Jason to play the idol, whereas, we have Jason, and obviously Jason brought it on himself by being too obvious about going idol hunting on day one, which we know he actually did. So despite all his protestations about paranoia, they were right that is what he was doing.
Right.
So it's not like they're just paranoid. He actually did do the exact behavior that they're concerned about. But it is, at the same time, I feel some endearing affection for him, just realizing that he screwed up so badly on day one and has just been trying to bail out his little sinking rowboat ever since. And he's working real hard at it, and it's just kind of he's doing what he can. So it's nobody's fault but his, but he's You know, it's actually kind of what Jamal said is like, you're doing what you need to do given the position you put yourself in.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's see. We got, yeah. So there's certainly agreement in splitting the vote. But Molly is one of the people who would rather have go for Nora. But this is where we have Kelly, Janet, and Lauren, and it seems like Lauren is the one kind of initiates this, discussing like, hey, you know, we've all got this plan, and so that seems safe. We've certainly got that as an option. So if we decide to not make a move here, we just do that. So that's fine. But Molly's clearly a player here. We could do something, and we could make a move. And my thinking here was just to say there are actually multiple advantages to making the easy vote this early in the game, because it allows you to preserve some degree of tribe unity, even if it is temporary, right? And everyone's got some ulterior motives, but at least there is a veneer of it, right? Whereas that's essentially blown up now, right? Because you have two people who are on the outside before and are not going to be on the inside now. But everyone else has split themselves in half now.
Right.
So you have a 2, and 5 instead of 8 and 1. So how that will, what ramifications that will have, we'll have to see. But I think that is one of the benefits of going with the easy vote early on, is it lets the group mind and the group ethic to be maintained.
Right.
So I initially was thinking, I don't know, for some reason I was finding myself skeptical that they would actually follow through with that plan to vote out Molly. Maybe just because I didn't think they should. Like, I could understand why it was happening, but I just sort of felt, to me, like that's not what I would have pushed for, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I was the same way. It's not what I would have pushed for. I recognize why they did it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was completely ambiguous going into the tribal council as to which way they were going to go. I didn't. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they tipped us one way or the other on this. I couldn't predict it. So. Mm-hmm.
So, especially since we actually had some evidence that even this 5 that are the people who kind of made this happen, right? Like, even they were not actually all 100% on the same page about all that. Right. We saw some of that, right? Well, but what we have is Lauren initiating with Kelly and Janet that, hey, maybe we target Molly. We know that we could get Jason and Nora on board with this plan, because why wouldn't they? It saves them, right? So they're, they think they want to move forward with that. This is where we have the sequence where Jason tells Nora that there's maybe a way to save themselves, and she's so happy that she wants to dance. And on the one hand, I like when people are so happy that they can't help but spontaneously dance, but on the other hand, like, chill, lady. Come on.
Chill. Yeah.
Yeah. People are actually watching us right now, and for me to come up and tell you something and for you to start to dance is absolutely the sort of thing that will make this entire plan explode.
Right. And then she has the whole thing where she's like sort of trying to like pretending like she's not dancing, but she's dancing. Like, just chill. Just, yeah.
It's great that you're happy, but there are certain social skills that are going to come in handy in this game. Let's use this as an exercise, practice, if you will.
Yeah.
Except it's a live fire drill here. But in the meantime, though, we have Janet bringing Tommy in on the plan, and he is the first one, sort of in this initial new plot, who's like, really? I don't really want to do that, because I feel like I'm close with those 3, and if we get rid of Molly, like, I can see some benefit there, but now then Jack and Jamal will be mad at me. And, what am I gaining in place of making them mad at me, well, I guess Molly would be gone. Is that enough? And I was thinking at the time that it seemed like I was personally thinking, well, no. You're early enough in the game that you absolutely still need allies, and of the people that you're talking about, I know which ones I would prefer to have.
Yeah.
But, so
yeah,
there's...
but I can see it down the line, like, they're so tight, and he's sort of like their fourth one, that it's like, can I really work my way up there? I mean, I don't think that this was the right move, but I can see why he would be, he could think long term they would cut him loose. And
right. Yeah, if if he sees the wind blowing in that direction and thinks they might have the numbers, which they would have, to do it without him,
then he's on the bottom on the other side. Yeah. So it's like, yeah.
So, yeah, I can see why he would go along with it, even if it was still maybe not what he would have wanted to have happen.
Yeah.
You know, if you see it going to happen, you don't want to be the one to not vote with the new majority. So that brings us to Tribal Council. And here's where we have a little bit of, Jason's protestations about, everyone got along with each other except for me. It's only because they were super paranoid about me looking for idols. And he kind of tries to make it seem like, they just got it in their heads. I don't know how. But he's doing what he can. But Kelly makes, a good point that she doesn't use the phrase, but it's essentially about reading the room, right? Is that when you have a new group of people forming, they're going to start trying to determine what are the norms of behavior in this combination of people. And that's an important skill, especially in a game like this, to be able to observe those things and not deviate from them in a way that leaves you as an outlier. Yeah. So I thought that was a good observation. Honestly, I was on Molly's side until she tried to say, I'm offended that you feel like you were in purgatory because we didn't feel that way. And that was, again, it was a little bit like Aaron's whole thing of like, oh, okay, but Molly, he's telling you how he feels, and you're saying you're offended that he feels that way. It's essentially that whole thing of like, well, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, therefore it's actually mean for you to say I hurt your feelings.
Right.
And I didn't like that. So on the one hand, so I think I'm sort of half rooting for Jason as a little bit of an underdog right now. I like how hard he's working to try to make, to fix things. And good for him that he managed to ride that particular wave. And I don't think that means he's totally in the clear, but he certainly managed to get over a major hurdle there.
Yeah, I mean, getting through that first vote and kind of getting it where he's just not the next vote also was good for him, for sure.
Yeah. So we have Nora talking. This is where, I mentioned this earlier, but she's talking about how she never really fit in with anyone, but she's also able to, with clear eyes, recognize, but I understand that does actually cause problems, and it's magnified here. It causes problems even in my real life, but here I can see it all the more, and I'm absolutely 100% sympathetic to her, but it's also the sort of thing like, well, but you came on a game where that's an important skill to have. So, not everybody's good at those things, and you don't have to be good at those things to be a good person. But you kind of do to be a good Survivor player.
Right.
It's just kind of like saying someone who can't run fast doesn't make them a bad person, but it does mean that maybe they shouldn't enter a 100-meter dash against people who are athletes. Or rather, you can enter, you should just not be too disappointed if you don't win.
Right.
Yeah. but in any event, her sort of take on how she won't give up is I'm going to tread water until I drown, which is one of those statements that's kind of like you squint at it one direction and it looks inspiring, and in the other direction you go, that's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
That's not a good attitude.
No, you're right.
That's really just stubbornness. You know, I'm not going to do anything to improve my situation. I'm just going to stick it out until it's over against my will.
Until there's failure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to force other people to initiate the change in the situation, but I'm going to be miserable and complain about it the whole time in the meantime. So, I don't know. But then again, who knows? Maybe having achieved a victory of sorts here, even though honestly she's really kind of only a pawn in this particular plan, maybe that brightens her up a little bit. Could make a difference. We've seen that happen before.
Yeah, we'll see if that works. So.
Yeah, you know, everybody, because that's the thing is, it hasn't been a big theme in this season so far, but there have absolutely been seasons where they focused more on people just dealing with the harsh realities of being out there on the beach, and it's a very stressful, physically and emotionally draining circumstance to be in.
Yep. Yeah. No, they haven't, like I said, they haven't showed that much here, but it is still part of it. And so, yeah, some good news sometimes goes a long way. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I liked also Dan, his point about just saying it's true that there are some personalities that don't mesh super well, but the players are also smarter than to make decisions just based on who's annoying you the most today. Which in some ways is a little bit of a dig against Molly's whole thing, which was, hey, we're all agreed to split the votes to focus on Jason, but I think Nora's more annoying, so that's what we should do. I don't know that he had that in mind when he said it, but I was certainly thinking it.
No, it definitely could have gone that way.
Yeah. But and this is where we had the exchange with Jamal saying it's a slow burn and we're in first gear. And Jason's like, not for me. You're in first gear, but that just means that you're not working as hard as, you know, like you're not engaging with this as much. You wouldn't have to be in first gear. But you know, like I said earlier, I kind of liked Jamal's answer to the effect of, yeah, but you're kind of running in the red already, to use the metaphor of, right? You're the one that's in danger because of how aggressively you've been going. But on the other hand, as we point out, even though I liked his answer, he's also actually wrong because he, through his relaxed attitude, missed the plot that ousted his ally. So,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I still like him, but yeah, he needs to, I think, take the L here, so to speak, and learn from that. So we get to the votes, and of course we had 2 votes for Jason and 1 vote for Nora, and then everyone else voted for Molly. And of course the 2 votes for Jason and 1 for Nora were Jack, Jamal, and Molly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really was everybody else against those 3. But yeah, so my note here was like, it's a big move, but it's so early, it just blows up any team unity they had. Not sure it was the right move, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I understand why they did it. I don't think I would have done it as the armchair survivor, but you know, we'll see how their tribe comes together after this. Maybe it inspires some of their lower-ranking people to be more in a better mood, and
sometimes you have to follow the group culture. Like if you see the group of people is forming a consensus that you disagree with, sometimes you choose not to fight that battle.
Yep.
But so next time, we have Vince being lobbied by Tom and Aaron and doesn't seem to necessarily be buying what they're selling. We see someone gets hurt. Like we see a woman on the ground. I wasn't sure just in the quick flash who it was.
It wasn't clear.
Yeah. But we see some blood on a hand and hear a line about, like, I can see the bone. So what's that all about? Well, we'll see. It's certainly very dramatic, but we've certainly also seen times where it was very dramatic and then turned out to be nothing. Plus, like, a deep cut like that, you know, if the medic comes out and, like, washes it out and gives you a bandage on it, like, wouldn't necessarily have to leave the game for that, right?
Yeah.
You just have to watch it for signs of infection. But anyway, and this is where we got the clue that the mission from the idols might involve sneaking into the other camp, which would be very cool. Nothing too special from Molly's final words. I mean, I think that that's reasonable just because she was totally taken off guard. She had no idea what just happened. You know, I think she took the right sort of lesson from it, which was like, clearly I missed something. And so I'm humbled as a result, but yeah, it was obviously a surprise in enough ways that she just really didn't know what had happened. So we'll see next time. But so I think that'll cover us. Unless you had any other final thoughts for this episode?
Nope. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay, great. So we'll leave it here. So we'll be back next week to talk about Survivor Episode 3 and try to survive until then. Good night.
Good night.
And stopping the recording.